Welcome to VSB After the Bell. I'm your host, Gianna Chell. With deep gratitude and respect, we are honored to be learning and unlearning on the ancestral and unceded lands of the Hamathquiyam, Skohomish Ohomeom, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. The Vancouver School Board is among the most diverse school systems in Canada, with an annual enrollment of approximately 50,000 students from kindergarten to grade 12 and adult education students. Have you ever heard of school-based teams? Well, one listener did and asked us to cover this topic on After the Bell. It's a great question because as a parent, if you heard of the term, you kind of know what it means, but then not really. So today I've invited Maiky and Sheryl Morris, both district case managers, who work with school-based teams. Thank you both so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
So to begin, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe starting with what does a district case manager do?
In my role, I am responsible for supporting school teams in working with diverse learners from kindergarten to grade 7. I help schools by helping them to support planning and programming and encourage inclusion and school success. Another part of my role is that I support all the elementary special education programs. I facilitate the entry and exit of students from the programs, and I support school teams in learning about the programs and the application process.
How about you, Maiky?
In my role as a district case manager for inclusion, I work with elementary and secondary school teams to collaborate with and create plans to promote student success. Also, I work with new and current resource teachers, sharing information, updates, and resources available to help them in their roles as resource teachers and as part of school-based team. And I also work with the members of the urgent intervention process team. So that's made up of district resource teachers, counselors, and our student support workers. And we work with school teams who would like some additional strategies and implementation support for strategies.
Okay, so I hear a lot of buzzwords that are being used, and we're definitely going to get into that later in the show. But let's start with the big question. What is a school-based team and what's its primary purpose?
So school-based team is a collaborative problem-solving unit. It develops instructional strategies and coordinates support for students. It brings together basically school-based staff and itinerant staff to plan interventions and address concerns at the school level.
From a behavior standpoint or from an academic standpoint?
All of it. The ultimate goal of school-based team is to address concerns. So whether it be academic, social, emotional, or behavioral, we really want to come up at the end of the day with a coordinated action plan. And that can be between school staff, within the school, but also ultimately in collaboration with parents. So a coordinated, collaboratively carried out action plan.
And early intervention.
Yeah.
So discussing these students early on so that we are able to support them and help them and so that they may be successful as they go on in school.
And how does a student get to have a school-based team assigned to them?
So the classroom teacher starts the process by identifying those students who may have an academic need, like you say, a social, emotional, or behavioral need. So they request an informal consultation with their school-based team. Parents or guardians are then informed and collaborate with the school team all along the process. They collect information. What will allow the student to be successful in this area? They use classroom-based assessment, could be a reading assessment, could be writing samples, observations, and gather data. And then they implement an action plan. So they might utilize different instructional strategies, implement positive behavior supports, change their learning strategies, and collect informal assessments. And then they decide, is this working? And if not, then it goes to the next level.
And so, yeah, like Sheryl said, if they need those tier 2 strategies, the classroom teacher will reach out to or request consultation from a school-based resource team member. And oftentimes that is our resource teacher. Sometimes it's the counselor. And they discuss what the data is showing, and then they come up with additional interventions or strategies, and they continue to collect data. I think it's really important to know that when we look at student progress, we're collecting data, we're collecting observations so we can inform ourselves whether those strategies are working or not so that we can pivot if needed. And then if additional support is required, they'll refer the student to school-based team.
So a school-based team, it will vary dependent on the need of the student, but it can include anywhere from a counselor to a speech pathologist to a psychologist, resource teacher. It kind of depends on the student's needs. Earlier, Maiky, you talked about collecting data. What do you mean by that? How does a teacher collect data on a student?
For example, if we're talking about a student who we're looking to support in reading strategies, we decide on an appropriate intervention, and then we'll collect data. How are they progressing? What is the baseline? Where are they reading right now? And then we'll collect data over weeks and perhaps a month or two.
Make sure it's working.
Yeah, and if there's no progress, then we say, what do we see in the data? What is it telling us? And perhaps we need to change the strategy, or we might need to choose a different intervention.
Okay. So a classroom teacher identifies the need for a student to have a school-based team. Can a parent do the same thing? How can a parent be involved in this?
Parents are always consulted throughout the process, and there's always open lines of communication between the parent and the teacher. So if the parent is seeing an area of concern, they can go to the teacher and discuss that and let their concerns be known. And then we see, is it happening at school as well? And many times it is. Other times it may only be something at home, and we work as a team.
What about at a secondary level? How does that work? Because there really isn't a classroom teacher. There are many classes.
They have at the secondary level school counselors. They can always reach out to any teacher if they're experiencing difficulty in a specific class. There's always admin that can also be reached. So again, the school-based level is always, I think, the very first step in addressing parental concerns, because those are the people that are working with their children.
Yeah. So for parents listening, it's contact whichever school staff that you have the strongest relationship with, especially at the secondary level, because there's so many different school staff that they deal with. And then the school staff will know how to escalate it if needed and get to the right person. Okay, so let's say a school-based team has been established. What's the next step? Can you walk us through what a family should expect?
So what would happen is the parents would be informed that the school-based team is meeting to discuss strategies and interventions to best support their student. And they can expect that at the school-based team, they'll start with the students' strengths. We really want to know what our students really excel at, what they love. That gives us that view into how else we can reach them in their learning or to share information. And then we bring with us the data, assessments, classwork, any logs that teachers or school staff have collected, and then they'll come together to discuss possible strategies, and the most important part about it is coming away with an action plan.
And so how often do the school-based teams meet with the student or with the family?
So most school-based teams meet as a school-based team twice a month. But that parent communication can happen regularly. So they will meet twice a month, but not always about that student. So they might meet, discuss the student, come up with the action plan, and give it a month to 6 weeks to see if what they're changing is helping. Is it successful? Do we need to make further changes? And then they come back and revisit, meet with parents, and keep going if it isn't being as successful as we would like.
How long will they have access to this team?
School-based team is not like a team assigned specifically to a student. We do have, for students with designations, for example, case managers that manage IEPs and communication with all the members on the team.
Individualized education plans. Yeah.
But a school-based team is actually just a formal time set aside to meet with school staff and district staff to discuss and problem solve together any number of students that might be referred to school-based teams. So it's not specific people, it's just a time for us to meet.
And sometimes a student may come up once, and then the action plan provides them with success, and they're not discussed again. Other students may be revisited a few times.
What are some common challenges a school-based team might face, and how are they addressed?
So one of the main challenges that they have is because they're a problem-solving body, is that for those students who are not easily discussed in just one visit, that are being discussed on an ongoing basis, that those students have to keep coming up to school-based team and keep problem solving and to keep finding those strategies and supports in order to support the students successfully.
How do you address that challenge?
So that's where we would go to the school-based team and they would invite the other staff that support the school, such as the counselor or the psychologist or the speech and language pathologist, who have other strategies and other supports and other ideas to bring to the problem solving.
And sometimes we might even bring in outside agencies. We do understand that there are outside agencies that support families and schools, and they can also provide important information and share strategies that they're using or practicing at home, or interventions that are in place that we can look at in terms of how can that support school success as well.
So if a parent gets a notification that says that their child is going to have a school-based team supporting them, like I imagine as a parent, would they feel like their heart drops because does that mean my child is, falling behind and they need this additional support? What would you say to a parent that's feeling that way?
Parents really just love their kids and want them to be happy and to be successful. And that, at the end of the day, is the goal at school, is to just promote student success. And one of the ways we do that is to meet as a school-based team to look at the ways that can happen in a timely manner. And so I think as a parent myself, we get nervous when we get that phone call from school, or if we get that conversation about your child might be falling behind. But like Sheryl said, early intervention, providing support and interventions at an early level will sometimes mean that down the road, they don't need those supports later on. But, oftentimes if we leave it and we don't provide those supports or we're not addressing those concerns early on, we do run the risk that it becomes a greater concern later on.
Yeah. And by meeting the students' needs, ultimately the students are more successful, but they are happier. Mm-hmm. And I think any parent who sees their student come home from school happy would feel.
Could having a school-based team on a student's VSB record affect their chances of getting into post-secondary?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. In fact, it would. The whole point of school-based team is to improve student success and to promote inclusion in school. So really, if we're doing it right, we are seeing more success, and that should support their success in school and into post-secondary education.
And school-based team isn't always focused on the stretches that a student has. Sometimes it's focused on the strengths, and it might be looking at that student and say, what can we do to further challenge that student?
That's a good point. That's right, yeah.
So what's really important, a takeaway here, is just to know that we are there supporting the kids whenever it's needed, whenever it's identified. Mm-hmm. We know all students require different paths to reach success. What I've learned today is that school-based teams are designed to help bring the right professionals together to support a student's individual needs, determine appropriate goals, and set up strategies for success. Sheryl and Maiky, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your insights and experience with us.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you so much.
Follow us on Instagram at VSB39 to make sure you don't miss when the next episode drops. Or subscribe to VSB After the Bell on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Special thanks to music teacher Mr. Bonnell and the Nightingale Elementary students for the original theme song. After the Bell with the VSB.